live at PlayStation Experience. We're on the show floor, and it's time for a very special panel. This is story time. We have some notable PlayStation folks here, some folks I'm sure all of you know, starting with Mr. Shuhei Yoshida. President of Worldwide Studios. Then we have Mr. Scott Rohde. Senior Vice President of Worldwide Studios America. And finally, last but certainly not least, Mr. Adam Boyes. Vice President of Developer and Publisher Relations at Sony Computer Entertainment America. So, hot on the heels of, I think, what I would describe as a very successful inaugural PlayStation experience.
Yeah!
Best show ever.
It really was.
I thought it might be fun. I think all of us thought it might be fun to take a little walk down memory lane, tell some stories from some industry veterans. You know, we have a couple questions we solicited, I have a hard time with that word, off Twitter. And we're going to be kind of firing back and forth here, trading war stories from being in the industry. So I have one that I've been wanting to ask all of you. I know some of your stories, but not all. How did each of you break into video games? How did you get your start in the game industry?
Start with me now?
Sure.
Well, there was a brick wall, and I put on a Kool-Aid Man costume. Always the bad jokes. I was actually, I've always loved video games. I tried making video games in high school, and I was terrible at programming. So I actually applied at Electronic Arts in my hometown, near my hometown, in Burnaby, British Columbia. Got a job as a tester on NBA Live 96 for $5.50 an hour.
Sweet.
And that was my first job. Yeah.
Canadian, so that was like $1 an hour. Yeah.
Game tester testing NBA basketball. So pretty cool.
Mr. Rohde.
Kind of a similar story. 1989 Sega Master System eSWAT. That was my first game. You know, I've been incredibly lucky to be in the industry ever since. Just totally blessed. Can't imagine doing anything else. Totally awesome.
Mr. Yoshida, how did you get your start?
Yeah, well, you guys are role models. You know, people start, you know, at the QA and testing games and, you know, go up. You know, it's so great. Dave Jaffe started like that as well. So I came later in 1993 when I was working for Sony PC business. So Sony was actually, you know, doing the first PowerBook notebook for Apple computer. We are designing and, you know, manufacturing for Apple. And when I was working there, you know, I got a call from Tokunaka-san, you know, the first president of Sony Computer Entertainment, that there's someone, you know, named Ken Kutaragi, you know, I want you to meet. So, you know, I didn't realize, you know, until after I met with Ken, it was an interview. And Ken said that, you know, they are making, you know, video game. And because I was working on the PC business, I knew things about computer graphics and how expensive it was to buy a professional computer graphics machine called Silicon Graphics. You know, it cost like $100,000. And Ken said that, you know, I'm making a system that's as powerful, but you know, we will sell it under $500. And I'm like, wow, this guy is a liar. This guy must be, you know, on something. So I went back to Tokunaka-san and said that, well, you know, Ken is liar, right? And Tokunaka-san said, no, I believe what he's saying. And I was like, that's amazing. I want to be in that team. So I became the first non-technical member of Ken Kutaragi's team in February 1993.
I did not know that about you. Sort of a follow-up question off that I have that I think is interesting and might be relevant for some of the folks listening here is, if you had to do it all over again, if you had to break into the industry again, in today's world, what would you do differently?
That's a tough one. I mean, I think back when I started, you know, there was only probably like a handful of thousand testers around the world. Now there's hundreds of thousands of testers around the world, so it's a lot harder to break in than it used to be. I think going the route of like doing a lot of reviews, talking about games, having a YouTube channel, going out to shows, meeting with different developers, putting together a portfolio of stuff to be able to break in, but I think it's way harder nowadays to break into the games industry than ever has been before.
What do you think, Mr. Rohde?
I'm not sure I would have done anything too different at the beginning, because kind of the same story. I mean, there were just, when there was a test department at Sega back in the day, there were 8 people there testing all first and third party games. It's unbelievable. Maybe what I would have done different, though, is a lot of my friends jumped from Sega and went to PlayStation in the mid-90s, and I kind of did my own thing for a while, and that was a great experience, learned a lot from it. But in retrospect, maybe I would have jumped to PlayStation with them maybe in 95 instead of coming in 03. But
If I can ask, what was the side thing that you did? What was your own
so myself and 2 other guys, we started a game studio called Page 44 Studios. That's actually how I met Shu. We were doing a job for PlayStation. It's kind of a funny story, actually.
Yeah.
Shu loves to tell this story, so please, go ahead.
Yeah, so in 2003,
Yeah.
so we lost the head of studio head of sports teams in San Diego. So I started, doing the search, and lots of people, resumes and interviews, and I didn't meet the right person, and it took me 6 months. When I was talking with the game director of MLB, the show, Chris Cuttridge. Chris was on stage yesterday.
Yeah.
He said that you know what, I know someone who can do the job, and Chris tell me, and I thought he was going to propose himself, but it wasn't the case, and it's Scott Rohde we are working with. Scott, that I was like, that's such a great idea. So I set up a meeting with Scott, this guiding with some other meeting.
It was funny, yeah. Shu actually brought me to the PlayStation headquarters and said, we know we're already doing a project with you, but I want you to look at all these other resumes to see if you can help me find someone to fill that position.
And as soon as Scott came in, and there's no resume to look at, right? And actually, can you do this? And initially, you are not, because you lived in,
I didn't want to move.
Yeah, and you had a great, studio. So it took a few months of convincing, and it took for you to convince your wife to move the family.
That's right.
So that's how, I met Scott, and it's been amazing 10, 11 years.
It's been a fun ride. And he likes to say he tricked me into joining PlayStation, which sounds ridiculous now, but I love that story. Yeah.
I have a theory that people who work in the game industry, there's sort of a game that makes them want to get into it. Do you guys have that game? Is there a game? I know there's a game that made me sort of say, man, I would love to work in this. I mean, really, and then lots of other games over the years furthered that. But is there a game that you played at some point in your in the past that made you say, man, I think I could do this, or this is something I seriously want to do?
Yeah, for me, it was actually Ultima 7. PC, I played a lot of PC games as a kid. And Ultima 7, the vast open world, it was such a massive universe. And then I was like, how do you make this? This thing's so huge. How on earth do you my mind just kind of exploded. And so when I started working at EA, I got in touch with the guys at Origin. I'm like, please, got to meet Sir Richard, Lord British. And I was like, how? He's like, you get a team of people together and you make a game. I'm like, but how? He's like, there's no magic wand to make this stuff. But that totally got me hooked, and I wanted to make games.
I think for me, it's going to sound a little bit silly, but even when I was very young and I had my Atari 2600, playing that game Adventure, and playing it the wrong way, so you found the secret. Such an awesome game. You're totally right. I love that game. I was only, 7 or 8 years old, but it inspired me in a way that I didn't know affected me until later, when I had to make a decision. Am I a database programmer or am I a game tester? And it was no contest. It was go become a game tester, and I'm really sure that Adventure was a game that inspired me quite a bit.
And actually, I never imagined I'd be on the game development side of business. And but I was a huge game fan, and I've been playing Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, and my favorite genre was the Japanese RPG. I played every single Final Fantasy or the Dragon Quest, and there are a lot more Japanese. There are a lot more JRPGs back in the days, and they are doing great stuff. And at the same time, I'm still a big fan of action platform games, and I'm so excited about those indie games. They are bringing back those great 2D action platformer and dungeon. Yeah, so I love indie games, but especially I love these type of games. So it's funny when I say this, but you may not believe, but when I joined Sony, I thought at that time that in the future, Sony is going to make a video game system because, it's a computer. And it just made sense to me that, as the tech advances, Sony would make video game system. And I thought, I was very young, I'm going to join that project. And that just happened. It's amazing.
Well, you're leading right into a question I have. Obviously, you know Ken Kutaragi quite well. He's the father of PlayStation, and I believe you were with the company as they were getting ready to release the original PlayStation more than 20 years ago. What was that like, and tell me a little bit about that experience.
Well, working for Ken was hard. Especially the engineering team had a really, really, really difficult time. I was not part of engineering group, so I had much easier time. But just, because we are small, we are talking, everything with everyone back in the days, and Ken is like Monday every week comes into the office, and he has a new idea, and he talks to engineers and look at what they are doing and ask, who said that? And they are like, you did? Ken is very, very good at forgetting what he said the week before, and tells completely opposite thing the next day. So the engineering team had these tactics of, just listen to what Ken says and decide how much of what he says they actually work on. Because engineering is hard, it takes a long time. And he's a genius, and I have, I had amazing career and life. And, that all, thanks to Ken. If Ken didn't accept me, or if I didn't have that chance, I don't know what I would have been doing. Maybe, making TVs or something. But working for Ken was hard. And Ken was, Ken had a really difficult time giving compliments to people. He gets competitive with everyone, and so he appreciates what we did, but he cannot say thank you. Or he couldn't say you did a good job because he knows he could do better. Working for Ken for many, many years, I got compliments from him twice. And when I say this, my colleagues at SCE says, twice, that's great. There are lots of people who didn't get any compliments at all. And so that's how it was like.
It's good stuff, that's gold. Yeah. Mr. Rohde, now, we know you have like a big history with Sega. You've been in the game industry for some time, but the console industry is definitely in a different place now than it was back, say, in the heyday of the Master System or the Genesis. What have you seen that's changed in that time?
Well, it's a great question. I was going to add when Shu was talking, my perspective on those first days of PlayStation is very different because we were at Sega and cartridge games were all the rage, and Genesis was really on the top of the world. It was kind of neck and neck with SNES, but it was a fun battle. And when we heard Sony, that TV company, was going to make a game system, nobody there believed. Nobody thought, what does Sony know about making games and a game system? We've been doing it for years, and then we started to see it come around. And that was at the same time that Sega was trying to make the Saturn, right? And it just, sadly, it just didn't work. So then I saw people like, Mark Cerny was at Sega back in those days. So in fact, I was the lead tester on several of Mark Cerny's early games. So we've known each other for a really long time. Talking about Ken Kugaragi being hard to work with. That was a little tough being a tester on Cerny's games too, but guy's another genius. He's an amazing guy. So everything changed when the PlayStation was started and CD-ROMs were the new medium for games. It used to be you wait 3 months and hope that nothing was wrong with your game and cross your fingers, right? And I think once CD-ROM came, it was just opened up the floodgates for how much you could put into your game and onto a disc. It was amazing stuff. Yeah.
Adam, you've been at it for a long time too. I mean, you have a history with Capcom. Tell me a little bit more. I mean, what have you seen change over the last 10, 15, 20 years?
Well, I think one of the biggest changes that's happened is really the back in the day you had that huge. Sorry about my voice, by the way. It's a little bit raspy.
It's sexy. It's sexy.
I'm Batman. Back in the day, it took a huge amount of people, like quite a few people, big submission process, very detailed, with big lead times, months and months to do it. And nowadays, smaller teams can do it, right? 5 people, 10 people can make games on their own. And the coolest thing is that now we have this flexibility where there's so many more types of games out there. Like back in the day, it was sort of like this business unit chose what games that you're going to play. And nowadays, it's like we as gamers choose what we want to kickstart or maybe invest in that we want to play too. So there's just so many more options and choices. So I think that freedom for us to choose as a gamer is bigger than ever before. And I think that's what's super exciting about nowadays. Back then, there was like, in a console a year, there may be 30, 40 titles, right? And nowadays, there's like hundreds, many each month. So I think that's a big change that's happened through the years.
In so many ways, it's come full circle. Because I think back to some of the games I worked on the Sega Genesis in the mid-'90s. You could build an NFL football game literally with a team of 4 people, and it would sell 1 million units, right? And now, it went on to these 1,000-man teams that exist today on some titles, and yet it's all the way back down to 4 guys making No Man's Sky, which is unbelievable, right? Yeah.
It's funny that you say that because actually I also worked at Midway in Chicago, and so I got to work with George Gomez, who made Spy Hunter, Ed Boon, who made Mortal Kombat, and Mark Turmel, all the old greats. And it was so cool because later on in my career, when people started making games with microtransactions, it was a big joke at Midway because they're like, that's what we used to do. 25 cents is a microtransaction. And to see the whole thing come full circle from the old arcade days to the Facebook game era and stuff like that where the microtransactions were there, it's kind of neat to see that whole, because Mark and George, all those guys would be like, we've done this before.
Well, I think that's a really great point, and it's something I've thought a lot about. I mean, as you get older, you start to realize what's old is new, right?
Yeah.
Things tend to be cyclical.
Yeah.
What trends do you guys see outside of, say, free-to-play or microtransaction, which absolutely was the initiatives really started with the arcade era. What trends do you guys see coming around full circle again?
Well, what's been great about these games today is people put together very quick hook to social media and sharing. And it doesn't have to be multiplayer online game. It can be just a single player game, but connected to other people. And you can see what other people are doing, or you can trade items, or you can stream the gameplay so that other people can even influence your play. So I think the developers are finding a new and interesting way to use this social connectivity to games.
Yeah. I also think that back in the day, I remember when I worked at EA, you put out a disc, and once that disc's out there, whatever data was on that disc is forever the game.
Yeah.
And nowadays, even a huge game like Destiny, where every single week I'm like, what does there have for me for sale this weekend? Or, there's new fixes and improvements happening all the time in all these games. And back in the day, it had to be perfect the first time. So the fact that they can continue to improve, listen to the feedback from the consumers and gamers, and then make stuff better, I think it's such a great thing that we have nowadays.
Totally agree. I think it's an amazing new way that games are going. Absolutely, yeah.
It's games of service. I mean, that reminds me, old arcade games. That's how they worked. You'd update them constantly.
Actually, yeah. So Mark Trammell used to tell me that basically how they would focus test by going to the bar and pulling up a stool right behind the arcade and watching people pay. And they would literally just take notes, how many times they died, what their score was, where they died. Nowadays we have these like telemetrics and ways that we can track all that stuff. But they would just have the chart. They would literally have drawings of the level and circle the areas where they died. George Ridley was Spy Hunter and stuff like that. And that's how they used to iterate. And then they would literally at night then load out the boards and swap the ROM boards in the different test arcades they had around Chicago.
But it's cool, it's cool. For Drawn to Death here at the show, it's literally back to the Trammell days.
Yeah.
Dave Jaffe is over there taking notes after each gameplay session. I think it's a really great way to get really personalized feedback. Yeah.
It's cool.
I hope he doesn't get too upset about what people say.
Dave never gets upset. What are you talking about?
He never swears either.
So Adam, I've actually got a question for you. We're talking about indies, we're talking about AAAs, and how things have changed. And one game and one studio that made a big impression, I think, yesterday at the keynote was Double Fine.
Yeah.
And I mean, game after game, we've got Day of the Tentacle Special Edition, and then Grim Fandango's coming out.
Grim Fandango.
That's coming out January 27th, confirmed on PS4 and PS Vita. I wanted to ask you, what is the story behind getting that? How did you talk? Tim Schafer, obviously industry legend.
Yeah.
These are classic games that people worship from many years ago. How did that all come about?
It's funny because when I first, like a PC gamer back in the day, I played a lot of those old LucasArts games, right? Full Throttle, right? Day of the Tentacle, all that great stuff. And so when I first came to PlayStation, we started trying to track down those IPs, right? And LucasArts was still an independent company, so we started talking to them and figuring out how the licensing would work. Then they got bought by Disney, and we continued to go after those IPs. And what I didn't really realize as we were going through and trying to get those IPs was I had never talked to Tim Schafer and asked him if he wanted to do it with us. So the plan was to try to get the IPs and get them to Tim. Tim didn't know that. So he gets a phone call one day from Disney. It's like, there's another company trying to take your IPs, right? So he calls us up. He's like, have you been having any conversations with anyone about my favorite games that I made? And I literally drove up to their office, and I was mortified because I get in this room, and literally the lights are off. It's very dark, and it's literally like a scene out of Grim Fandango. And Tim's sitting across the table. So have you been speaking to Disney and LucasArts about anything lately? And I'm like, it's a really long story. I love your old games. It was all going to be for you. And because he thought we were trying to take him away from them. And so it was a surprise, just for you. So like we totally, after like an hour, he's like, okay, I think you might be honest. And then a couple hours later, we started figuring out how do we do it? How do we bring back Grim? How do we bring back Day of the Tentacle? And so on. And so it's kind of a funny story. I think he trusts me now a little bit more, but in general, it's a pretty cool process. And I learned a good lesson. Always ask the creator before you go jumbling around with IPs.
While we're revealing all these sort of secret tales from our past, there's another one I think people have asked about, and I've certainly got a lot of questions. How did that sort of famous PS4 share, this is how you share games on PS4, how did that come about from a couple of E3s ago? Yeah.
So that was like, I think about a week before E3, and there was a lot of hubbub about all the new consoles and stuff like that. And I remember talking about like our share policy internally, and we were trying to figure out like how do we show everyone how it works? Like what's the best way? I'm like, we can do a page on the internet that shows how you share. And then I remember I was actually just about to jump on a flight to LA, and I shot a note to Jack Trenton, to Scott Rohde, and a couple other people, and I said, we should just do a video where somebody gives somebody else a game and says, this is how you share it. And within 20 seconds, Scott responds like, in all caps, oh my God, best idea ever. And the other execs were like, I don't get it, right? So we landed, and we're on site, like practicing for E3, behind the scenes. And I tell the guys at PR, they're like, I don't know about this. The camera crew, and the Shu shows up, I'm like, Shu, you need to be in it, you need to do this video. Here's the idea. And she was like, okay.
Yeah,
And then I was like, but I said, we got to figure out who the other person is. He's like, your idea. You're in it with me. I'm like, that was not the plan, but okay. And then we shot it. They edited it behind the stage. Like, so this all happened like 2 days before E3.
Yeah.
Edit behind the stage. We finished it up. We showed it to Andy House. Andy's like, that's hilarious. That's great. And then he goes, we should put in the press conference. It's really funny.
We did like 4 different
4
versions.
takes, right?
Yeah.
What were some of the takes? So one was the thanks.
Yeah.
I think one was that was easy.
Yeah.
Scott was there.
I was the executive producer on the video. So one
he gets
was
all the royalties.
one was a super long smile, and we wanted to add a twinkle.
Right.
Remember? That's right. But
Yeah.
the subtle version was the best.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because one was that was easy, and I'm like, I think that's somebody else's tagline.
It's like Geico or something like that.
yeah.
Who knows?
So we did it, and then so Andy saw it, said, love it, let's put in the press conference, and it was sort of made sense for Jack's section. We talked about all the policies. Jack saw it, he's like, it's not going to the press conference. You guys can tweet it out. He loved it. He said it's hilarious, but it makes more sense for us to tweet out. So while he was doing his section, we were out back, like literally synchronized tweet, like writing the tweet out, ready, set, and as soon as he announced it, we'll go boom, and send it out. And the dumbest commercial ever was born.
That video was watched like 14 million times.
Well, I mean, that was like the definition of viral. I've never seen anything just so, I mean, that just exploded. It was such a memorable moment, I think, for you guys. I was sort of, honestly, you had worked at the company for 6 or 9 months at that point, maybe a year.
It's about a year, yeah.
Yeah, and I was kind of like, oh, this Adam Boyd is like, look at this guy. I really put you on my map at that point.
Well, a lot of people came up to me that E3 and would just be like, can you share this with me? Yeah, so now it's...
I was going to put you guys through that up here, but I decided it was... we have other fish to fry here. So on that note, we solicited, sent out a few tweets earlier. A couple of you guys sent in some great questions. I wanted to give you guys an opportunity to speak to them because I think they're kind of cool. This one was from Nintendo Gone. Any passion projects you would love to work on or have worked on? Rohde,
I have easy options.
Shuhei, please.
We are working on Project Morpheus. Anything about Project Morpheus is passion project. Everybody involved in the development of the system and games, it's our dream.
Wow, there's so many ways I could go with this, and I think, Sony actually helped fulfill this dream because one of the things Shu knows about me is I'm a crazy baseball head. And so coming to San Diego was kind of a dream. Can I work with a lot of these guys that I had worked with at Sega, actually? Can we just work as hard as we can to make the best baseball game we can? And it's been a dream working with that team. Such a great group of guys. So absolutely.
For me, it's hard because we work with so many publishers, developers around the world, and we get a lot of phone calls of like, hey, we want to show you the brand new thing that we're not going to announce for 2 years. And for me, that part of the job is so incredible because they bring you in, nobody else has ever seen it, and they show it. I remember when Bungie brought us in, and we're sitting there and we're just like, this is the first time anyone, it's just the coolest thing. So in my job, I'm super blessed because I get to see all this stuff way before and get super excited about stuff. So I kind of already have that situation where I live vicariously through all the great partners that we have and stuff. And of course, then I get to go to things like our Kino and see Uncharted 4 and be like, oh my God, it's so cool.
What for you guys, just on an individual gamer level, what was like a game that at the keynote, which had I think approximately 1 million games were revealed there, was there something that just on a very deep personal level you were just like, that is awesome?
Other than Super Time Force Ultra.
Other than Super Time Force Ultra.
Yeah, like I said, I'm a huge fan of 2D action games and a big fan of the Drinkbox Studios games, and I'm so excited to see the new games, and actually I played it here on the Vita. So that's the one.
Excellent.
I mean, again, so many answers, but it has to be Uncharted 4. I know that's kind of the boring answer, but seeing that in development all along, I mean, even seeing it, frankly, 2 or 3 weeks ago, didn't look like that 2 or 3 weeks ago. Those guys are amazing. They pulled it off.
Yeah.
For me, there's sort of two. I think Shovel Knight on my Vita. Shovel Knight's so awesome with Kratos in it. That literally will be my new addiction on the Vita. And then being able to be on stage with Ono-san and now Street Fighter V with him, that was super awesome. I mean, I've always, since I worked there, I'm a little bit biased, but I've always loved working with those guys. And Street Fighter V, being able to announce that was super cool.
You know,
It was so funny when you showed the Street Fighter 4 first.
oh, that was good. That was good.
Ultra Street Fighter 4. Are you expecting something else?
You know,
Sometimes these things happen.
you know, really quick, since Adam took over this role as head of third party 2.5 years ago, it's made my job so much more fun. So when you see things like the collaboration of Kratos in Shovel Knight, that's because there's like-mindedness
Can
here.
we do this and put this in that? And he's like, okay.
Yeah,
and
we
then
figured it
David
out.
Scott will be like, hey, I saw this game the other day. It looks awesome. Can you guys look into it? We're like calling them up, be like, you want to come to the platform? So.
But it's great because there's a gamer in the third party side, there's a gamer in the first party side, and we just can't wait for all these things to be married.
Yeah.
And it's awesome. Love this stuff.
So we got another good question from Gabe Counts on Twitter.
Yeah.
What is your favorite all-time game on any PlayStation platform? That's a tough one.
That is a tough one.
I know Rohde especially agonizes over this. So does Shuhei.
I know.
They have so
MLB
many-
the show.
That is close. That is
okay.
up there. That is way up there. It is way up there. But man, I play so much sound shapes these days. I think I love that game. For any of you who, I mean, I've published, I don't know, 90 levels on that game. I just absolutely love it. So it is sneaking up that list. That's all I can say.
Okay.
I'm selfish. I picked the one I worked on. It's called the Apex game, the PS1 action
Apex
platform.
game. Yes.
For me, the one that totally changed my gaming life was Grand Theft Auto 3.
Oh, yeah.
Right, when that came out, and it was just like, you can do this in a video game. It was
Yeah.
just the most amazing, like, epiphanal moment, I think, of the transition of our console. It's crazy.
Do what in a video game?
Everything. Whatever you want, Scott. Whatever you do on the weekends, you can do in this game.
It's not often.
I mean, drive cars.
It's not often when a game comes out and just instantly changes everything.
Yeah.
overnight.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
that's very rare.
I remember because I was at Midway at the time, and they were like, we need every game to be open
Yeah.
world. And every game you need to be able to drive a helicopter. We're like, that doesn't make sense for Spy Hunter.
And I know you like Dark Souls, right?
Dark Souls is huge for me. I mean,
Yeah.
if I had to name my #1 favorite game on a PlayStation console, I mean, that's just absolutely brutal. Yeah, Tekken 3's up there, honestly. That's kind of out of left field, but I love Tekken. Huge Tekken fan. Here's another one. It's Magic Neil, tweeted out. What was the first online game you ever played? Now, I mean, I think on that note, I remember playing, I think the first one I ever played was the original Unreal Tournament on PC.
Okay.
It was probably my first multiplayer online game.
Yeah.
And it was actually on a dial-up modem.
Yeah.
Not the greatest experience, but just good enough to go, ooh, this is going to change everything. So
Yeah.
what was the first online game you guys ever played?
I know
What
mine
about
was.
that MMO, the first came out, the RPG, the Ultima.
Ultima
Online.
yeah.
Ultima Online.
That was mind blowing
Yeah.
Yeah.
to think about these other characters, other people, and we are trying to steal things. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Break into their houses, right?
yeah.
I remember for me, and this is, I honestly don't even remember the name. It's sort of a nameless multi-user dungeon, like a turn-based game. And I remember it was so enlightening to me. My friend had an old Atari ST computer, and after class, we'd go over to his house, and you'd wait until 12:01 because that's when you could take another turn,
Yeah.
right? And knowing that what I do is affected by what everyone else is doing was such a revelation to me. It's just incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, my brother and I actually ran a bulletin board service back in those PC days and played Barren Realms Elite. But I remember when we got Kali, which was like an app for PC, for DOS, where you could play online games. And we played Warcraft 2 with my friends across the country, which was super cool. That was the first one I was like, this is the future.
It's funny to think that at one point it was sort of a feature, or it was like, oh, it has online play. But I mean, more and more, not exclusively, but more and
Remember
more.
the PS2 box that hooked on the back?
Oh, yeah.
Big, huge thing.
Yeah,
right?
like
Comp,
online play.
Yeah, online play.
Yeah. So we don't have a lot more time, but I was curious if you guys had any final stories that perhaps you'd like to reveal from your storied careers. It is story time after all. Tell me a story, Adam.
I've told a lot of stories. That's why my voice is hoarse.
Too many stories.
Think about that.
Scott, you have to have something good from Sega.
Well, there's plenty of stories from Sega, but I'm going to say this story, and I'll probably put my job at risk by doing it. But we talked about this the other day in your office. That's why I want to tell it. But it's so funny because it's a story about Shu. So some of the things that Shu might not know, yeah, it's just so funny. So I think Shu has changed a lot in the last 6 to 7 years since he's had his twin girls, right? And I think it's just, changed so much. But in the early days of me working for Shu, this man, believe it or not, could be pretty intimidating. And when
he doesn't smile,
see, look at that, look at that.
Super rare, but you see it.
So when anyone in Worldwide Studios America had to deliver bad news to Shu, there was a lot of fear. There was a lot of thought that went into the email that had to be sent to Shu in Japan. And the act of sending the email, pushing send, some people started calling that Russian Shulette. But we had lots of names for it. But again, I think that so much has changed, with our working relationship in the last 7 to 8 years, and we just have so much fun together. When we get together, we don't talk budgets, we don't talk spreadsheets, we don't talk corporate. First thing every time, what are you playing right now? And we just talk about that for hours, and it's so much fun. So.
I remember when I first went to Shu's office in Tokyo, and I saw these 2 huge stacks of games on his desk, and his desk is just games and stuff everywhere. And I'm like, just kind of felt, I'm like, need to tidy up a bit? And I'm like, sure, is this your backlog? And he just taps his hand on one pile, goes, done, not done. And they were like huge. Yeah.
This Christmas is, huge, big games coming out in 2, 3 or 4 games the same week for this Christmas. It's amazing.
Open world games, no less.
Yeah. So I have a huge stack of big games waiting for me to play.
Shuhei, do you have any fun stories about Mr. Rohde?
Yeah, so I was totally convinced to get Scott on board, and Scott was resisting, and still, but we are working on titles.
Yeah.
And Scott was saying, I don't know, and but I was convinced, and finally, Scott agreed, and I had to kind of discuss with Scott's other partners to make this thing transition peacefully. So everything was set, but still, my boss at the time was Jack Tretton.
Yeah.
So I had to get Jack's approval, sign off to get Scott on board. And Scott came to the office to interview Jack, and Scott has some, you have some eye thing, right?
Yeah,
so always,
problems with my
always
eyes,
has sunglasses.
Surprisingly enough, I don't have sunglasses on my head right now, but I usually do.
Yeah. So Scott came into the interview with Jack with sunglasses on, and after the conversation, Scott left, and I asked Jack, so what do you think? And he said, sunglasses.
He said, that's pretty cocky to wear sunglasses to an interview.
Yeah. So you almost didn't join us.
But luckily, Jack and I joked about that for years after. It was good. Yeah.
Gentlemen, before we take off, any final thoughts about PlayStation Experience? This is the first annual PlayStation Experience. I think that the vibe is good. I think people liked it. What do you guys think? Any final?
Yeah, we started talking about this a while back, and this whole idea of this show. We've been to a lot of other shows, PAX, BlizzCon, EVE Fan Fest, stuff like that. And we sort of we're all hanging around, we're like, why haven't we ever gotten together with our fans to hang out for a couple days and play a bunch of games? And it was literally the easiest pitch and approval process in the history of anything we've ever done. We just asked them, we should do. And literally people are like, don't we already do that? Haven't we done that before? Why aren't we doing that right now? So to see everyone come out from all around the world, I met some people from Norway and Sweden that are here, from Guatemala, from all around the US and Canada. It's been incredible to meet all the fans and be here in what I think feels like one of the best shows I've ever been to. I mean, being here with all of our fans has been incredible. So it's been amazing. Really cool.
Thank you guys.
Thank you guys all for coming.
This means so much to us. You have no idea.
Thank you.
So great. So great. Met so many great people over the last couple of days.
It's been awesome. Just incredible.
Unbelievable.
Any final thoughts, Rohde?
Now that we want to start crying because we're so happy. Again, just echoing everything Adam said. This is amazing. We hope we can do this again. We can't wait. You guys have been awesome. It's fun just walking through the hallways in this place. It's just
never
so
been
much
more fun walking in my hotel room.
That's right. It's awesome.
Mr. Yoshida, any final thoughts?
Same way. I feel so at home here, and it's like I'm surrounded by lots of friends that I've known for years. So I really want to come back, if we are doing this again. And I'm sure the developers who are here must have been feeling the same way.
Yeah.
So hopefully, you convince Sean Layden to put this together again.
Hold on. Sean, should we do it next year? He'll get back to me. What do you guys think? Should we do it next year? I think that's a pretty good focus group result.
There you go.
Right?
It sounds like a mandate if I ever heard one. Guys, thanks for joining us so much. Thanks for joining us for story time. We are out of time for stories, but this is it. This is the last broadcast for PlayStation Experience this year. Give everyone a hand. Give yourselves a hand. Thank you so much for coming. And if you're watching this on Twitch, thank you so much for joining us. We've had a lot of fun broadcasting PlayStation Experience to you live from the show floor. Hopefully see you next year. What do you think?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
PlayStation